Effective summarizing and note-taking help students acquire and integrate various kinds of knowledge.
When we look at summarizing and note-taking, you will find that this is a category of strategies that go across the board in all content areas.
Mildred Chapman helps her social studies students summarize.
There's so much factual information, you know, to digest. As much as possible in summarizing, I try to make it in a form of a story, and again, connecting it to real life, you know, and mentioning things that I know they can connect to.
Were you taught how to summarize? Not very many people. I would say maybe 10 people out of this entire group were taught how to summarize. We make a huge mistake in the classroom when we have students come in and we say, well, I want you to read this passage or this text and summarize it. They don't know how to do it. We have to provide the steps for them on how to summarize. We have to shape their behavior and provide feedback, and we have to give them opportunities to practice so that eventually I can hand out a chapter or a passage or a text for them to read, or I can show them a video and say, I want you to summarize this. In order for students to summarize, they have to delete some information, they have to keep some information, and they have to substitute some information. And in order to summarize, you have to be able to put what it is that you've learned in your own words. And whenever we move students to putting what it is that they've learned in their own words, they have to analyze information at a fairly deep level. If I were first modeling this with my students, what I would do is I would show them a passage. With a red marker, I would probably just, and I'm just going to randomly do this, but I would probably just cross out, you know, what's not important, okay? Then with a green marker, I would probably begin to circle what I think is important that I'm going to keep. Then, with any other color marker, I would take what I deleted, what I kept, and I would begin to construct a sentence or two in my own words.
This paper you're supposed to write on, okay?
Peggy Scheidecker is teaching her students how to summarize the video they watched on the French cartoon character Asterix.
If I asked you to summarize the entire Asterix video, how long would that take you? A long time? Why do you say that?
The video was long.
The video was very long, wasn't it? In fact, we couldn't even show it in one entire block. So we're going to narrow it down. We just simply want to stick to the topic Asterix, although you may want to introduce some other characters. We need to look now at the restrictions. These will be your key points. Regardez, look at restriction numéro 1, s'il vous plaît. I wrote it in Francais, but would you please, someone, translate for us in Anglais what the first restriction asks? Veronique.
His dominant physical traits.
Right. So in that space right there in the papier, would you please write down what are Asterix's dominant physical traits? We've never really done summary writing. There would have been a time when I would have said, okay, write about, review the Asterix video. And that's just too broad a topic. Even for myself, I could do that, but not for students today. Now they have to look at their information and they have to decide what's important. You know, what is the most important point about this character or whatever we are summarizing? And they have to narrow the field. And I think that's important to learn how to throw out the unnecessary pieces of information.
At Abraham Lincoln High School in Council Bluffs, social studies teacher Dirk Waller uses a problem-solving frame for summarizing the history of Egypt's old, middle, and new kingdoms.
Every time there's an old, middle, new kingdom, there's several changes in there, all right? What do you suppose caused those changes? Did the Pharaoh just say, oh, you know, I'm tired of having all the power. I'm going to give a lot of the power to the common people?
They were complaining, going, oh, I'm not happy.
Okay.
And I'm sure somebody probably stood up and said, hey, this isn't right.
Okay.
Kind of like Rosa Parks or something.
All right, kind of similar to that. Maybe not as much of a massive movement, but they kind of learned their lesson because something happened here and something happened here that kind of made them learn their lesson. What are those two periods called? Do you remember from your reading?
Illness.
All right, the first illness
The problem for the students is to figure out what caused those changes or illnesses.
So they had to figure out, like a doctor does, what caused that problem for those illnesses. So after they figured out the problem, which they're doing right now in their groups, then they're going to come up with several different solutions for those groups.
When the groups are through working, they let Mr. Waller know when they are done.
So what's the problem? What was their diagnosis? What was wrong with them?
We put the problem is the change in the climate, and the reason they believed that the Pharaoh had the power to control rain, and the rain hadn't come for 6 years, so the people didn't trust him anymore. So they tried to overcome him.
Once the problem is defined, each group is asked to find 3 solutions for one of the problems.
You can think outside of the box. You do not have to come up with absolutely the same solution. It does not have to be completely logical. Think outside. Get creative. All right? You guys have illness 2, the second illness. 3 solutions to that problem. You guys have illness 1. You guys have illness 2. And you guys have illness 1. After they do those solutions, then we'll do a little bit of a follow-up activity where they're going to tell me, like, what were the clearest points, what were the things that they're going to remember when they walk out of the classroom today. List off your 3 solutions.
Irrigation, get a better Pharaoh, and get hoses.
All right, invent the hose. Why a hose?
Like, so they could spray the crops so that they don't turn into that, even worse.
All right, all of yours involved water. What's the problem with the water one?
There was no rain.
We're in a drought, but you guys are saying to go to the Nile and bring it back in a better form of irrigation, all right? The hoses. That works, all right? This group.
Irrigate with water from the sea that has been desalted.
Desalted water from the sea. Build a huge canal. Good.
Trade with neighbors.
All right. More trade so you don't rely on your own food.
And migrate to a new land.
All right, and migrate, move. All right, does that make sense? How about move out of the desert? It kind of puts the student in charge. It always makes you think, okay, from the student perspective, what are some other possibilities that may be going in their mind? We get them to the one that we want, and we usually quit. So this one encourages them to look further into it, into the situation.
Typically, note-taking is done in an outline form. However, there are other forms of effective note-taking.
One of the things that the research tells us as we move into classroom practice is that we need to teach a variety of note-taking styles or formats so that students can pick and choose which format is going to work best for them.
4 research-based generalizations include: verbatim note-taking is perhaps the least effective way to take notes.
So if you have students copying notes from your whiteboards or from transparencies, stop.
Notes should be considered a work in progress. Notes should be used as study guides for tests, and the more notes that are taken, the better. Variations of note-taking include an informal outline, a web, or combination notes.
I'm trying to spend more time teaching them how to take notes. So when we do vocabulary, and on the first day when I introduce the words, I try to teach them when I discuss the words, if I say something that's not there, write that down, and teach them how to take a long piece of information and shorten it into something that they can use as a study guide later on that has meaning for them.
Each student keeps a notebook which includes the advance organizers.
This was how to plan a 5-paragraph essay, and then we showed 3 different types of organizers they could use.
When you're first teaching how to take notes, you may want to share your own personal notes on a subject matter that you're teaching or a topic that you're teaching so that they can see either the outline format or a graphic organizer, but they can see the model of it. Teachers will also use this to hand it out as a cue system to front load their lesson. That here is an outline of my notes on this content. There's a blank, section for you to add your notes to my notes. So it begins to scaffold their learning that you can use your own notes as a cueing system for students. They can add to their notes, but do you see what a nice scaffold that is versus here, now go take notes? So it begins to step by step walk them through the process, and they have an idea of what